There is a Democrat conspiracy to keep black and brown women down and not succeeding and failing. I'm convinced of it, and I'm going to break it down for you. First of all, in the last few days, all we've been hearing basically from liberals on social media or even on legacy media is some variation of America failed Kamala. A country cannot fail a candidate. A people cannot fail a candidate. A party cannot fail a candidate. It is the candidate's job to convince the party, to convince the people, to convince the country to vote for them. And this is what I tried to explain to the diehard DeSantis fans. And I'm a DeSantis fan, but the people who could not move past the fact that he was defeated in the primary, and they blame Trump supporters for that. You can't blame people for voting wrong. You didn't convince people. That's your job. And we've been hearing over and over that Kamala is essentially flawless. She ran a flawless campaign, but she lost because she's a woman, and even more so, a brown woman. To that, I want to say a few things. If you believe that America is fundamentally racist and sexist, and you also believe that Trump is a fascist dictator and basically Hitler, why are you choosing in this critical moment to put up a brown woman as your candidate? I'm not going to say nominee because she wasn't nominated, but really, genuinely, if you believe that the threat is that grave, and you also believe that America is inherently racist and sexist, now's the time where you're choosing to put up a black woman, a brown woman, whatever she is? Really? I also want to point out that if you believe that racism and sexism is woven into the very fabric of this nation, why do you care so much who's in charge of the damn thing? If you think the whole thing is shot from the beginning and we can't go back and rewrite history and we basically have to burn it all to the ground, why do you care so much who runs the damn thing? But I also want to point out that when you tell people that Kamala didn't win because she's a woman, because she's a brown woman, no less, and they do this all the time. It's not just with this election. They do this all the time. They do this with themselves. They do this basically anytime something does not go their way, whenever a brown woman does not succeed, or a brown person or a woman. If you believe that that is why, and you keep saying that, aren't you then encouraging brown women to keep failing, basically? Aren't you encouraging brown women to keep being mediocre, to keep being lesser than white men? And this is not me saying that brown women are inherently lesser than white men, but I'm saying if we live in a culture where it is socially acceptable for you to never have an ounce of introspection or self-reflection, and to instead say, I lost this because I'm a brown woman, and I'm not saying Kamala is saying this, but I'm saying we live in a culture where this is an acceptable narrative, or she lost this because she's a brown woman, aren't you keeping brown women down? Aren't you making sure that brown women fail until such time as someone, usually a white man, comes along and says, let me give you something because you're brown, because you're a woman? Because how are you ever going to win? If you lost because of your genitals, if you lost because of your skin color, how are you going to win? How are you going to change your genitals? How are you going to change your skin color? You're not. So you're going to sit around waiting for someone, again, usually a white man, to come along and be your savior and say, here, let me give you something because of the color of your skin, because of your gender, because you're so oppressed. That's pathetic. That is disempowering. That's awful. And you know what? White men typically cannot get away with that BS. They can't. If a white man goes around and says, I didn't get this because I'm a white man and the decks are stacked against me, he is far less likely to be propped up in that narrative among his friends, his peers, his social groups. If he got online and said that or said it publicly at all, he would be far less likely to be well received. But a brown woman says that, and she's not only encouraged, she's also celebrated for saying it. If a brown woman comes out and says, I didn't get this because I'm brown or because I'm a woman, that's crazy. Iron sharpens iron, which means that if white men are more likely to have to look inside and be like, well, how did I fail? What did I do wrong? Where do I need to do better? They're going to be sharper. They're going to be better. They're going to be stronger. If we're not encouraging women to do that, if we're not encouraging non-white people to do that, if we're not encouraging specifically non-white women to do that, then they're going to be weaker. They're going to be mediocre. They're going to be lesser. Again, not inherently, but just because we live in this very backwards, coddled society where, in my opinion, it's a Democrat conspiracy to keep non-white women down. This is crazy. It is completely disempowering. It's ceding all of your power to external forces, to white men to be better, to white people to be better, to men to be better. And that's just never going to happen. You can't change the entire world. You can't change all 320 million Americans or whatever it is, but you can change yourself. You can look in the mirror and wonder, where did I go wrong? And I want to be really clear, this has implications beyond Kamala Harris. I'm not saying she is doing this. I'm saying we live in a culture where it is socially acceptable for women to blame other people for their failures, for Black and brown people to blame other people for their failures, and specifically for Black and brown women to blame other people for their failures. And that is always going to keep you stuck, mediocre, and lesser than.